Well, that, of course, just a handful of days from the one-year anniversary of the deadly attack on Israel that triggered the current crisis. And as supporters back here prepare to mark October 7, authorities now fear violence on Australian streets.
We've always supported the right of free protest, but all rights have limits.
Pro-Palestinian rallies planned for October 6 and 7 in Sydney, marking the first anniversary of Hamas's deadly attack on Israel, which killed nearly 1,200 people. Sparking the war in Gaza, a sprawling humanitarian crisis, and an escalating spiral of attacks and retaliation spreading across the Middle East.
For many Australians with family, be it in Israel, the occupied Palestinian territories, or in Lebanon, this is a very difficult time. It's not a time to raise temperature.
Today, New South Wales Police launched a legal bid to ban the pro-Palestinian gatherings on both days on the grounds of public safety.
I support the police in whatever action they've taken.
We cannot have a situation where violent or illegal behaviour spills out onto the streets of Sydney with the one-year anniversary. We saw it days after the 7th of October events down at the Opera House. We have to prevent and take action to ensure that we don't see a repeat of that.
The protest organisers say the move is an attack on fundamental democratic rights.
We've organised 51 weeks of peaceful, successful mass demonstrations.
Monday's event billed as a candlelight vigil.
A chance, really, for the Palestinian and now Lebanese as well and other families here to grieve for their lost loved ones.
We have to bear in mind that Israel's rightful and legitimate response did not begin on October 7, it began about a week later. So the fact that they're commemorating on this day says everything about their motives and their intentions.
The police action comes just days after protests in Sydney and Melbourne saw a minority flying the flag of terrorist group Hezbollah.
I think that was truly shocking for the Jewish community and should be shocking for the general community, because we must challenge terrorism. It really attacks our very way of life.
The protesters say they will proceed with the planned action. Sunday's rally expected to be the largest yet.
We need the people of the world to protest. We are definitely not going to stop now.
I appeal to these protesters, show a shred of dignity, of humility, of shame. Leave this one day alone.
Former New South Wales Police Deputy Commissioner and Counter-Terrorism Commander Mick is here with us now to discuss this. So, Mick, we heard from some of the protest organisers there. They've been gathering for the past 51 weekends. Overwhelmingly, these have been peaceful protests. Do you think the New South Wales Police have made the right call here in applying for a ban?
Well, good evening, everyone. Yes, I do. We need to remember that in the Sydney CBD alone, there's between 1,500 and 2,000 protests a year that are conducted without a problem. But community safety has to underpin the conduct of those protests. And on this occasion, after negotiating with the protest organisers, the police feel that they can't ensure public safety, and they've got no other recourse but to take it to the Supreme Court to get a decision in relation to it.
So they have to go to a Supreme Court. The police can't make this decision on their own. They can't stop a demonstration in a democracy. So they have to convince a court.
Well,
I'm a bit unsure here about how do they, if they think there's a public safety concern, do they have to prove that to the court? What do they have to show in order for the court to agree with them?
Yeah, well, protests are conducted in New South Wales under the Summary Offences Act, where a Form 1 can be lodged, sometimes it's not. And when a Form 1 is lodged, then the protest can proceed unless police feel that they can't conduct the protest safely, and therefore the Supreme Court is the only option they've got. So when they go to the Supreme Court, and it doesn't happen often, they have to convince the court that under all the circumstances and taking everything into account, that the conduct of a particular protest is more likely than not to be unsafe to the public. And so it's a threshold that they have to meet and a decision that the court has to make.
It's going to be a pretty difficult weekend for a lot of people across New South Wales. Organisers say that they admit that they can't actually guarantee that we won't see those Hezbollah flags that we saw flying at some of the rallies in Sydney and Melbourne over last weekend. If that does happen again, what should police do? How should they deal with that?
Well, I think the general public out there, and it's sort of widespread sentiment, is that police need to be taking strong action and making arrests. Now, they have to operate within the confines of the legislation that exists, and that simply waving or possessing a flag is not enough. There has to be certain thresholds that have to be met. But the legislation itself is only new. It hasn't been tested, but I think it's time it's tested. And I think that the general public would expect that arrests be made.
The protesters have said that they'll go ahead regardless of the outcome. In these scenarios, I'm interested in your experience. Does that tend to lead to more tension?
Well, it can. I mean, there's certainly a time right at the moment where tensions are high, but I think that comment by the protest organisers says more about the fact that the attitude of the protesters themselves, that they would defy a court order. Therefore I ask the question, how could they possibly control those that are involved in the protest itself? It puts public safety at risk, it puts police officers at risk, and I think now is not the time to conduct that sort of a protest.
All right, Mick, thank you very much for your time. We'll see what happens on the weekend.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.